Shio-nage comes from shio-giri, four-corner cutting. So a little bit this movement, think if you had a sword, this is like block cut. It's like block cut, block cut. So that first technique is like, that is so, I wouldn't go like, I wouldn't pull it back and do like that. Just this goes into that. So it's like, that feeling. So John once again. So that in by itself, as he's making this punch, is just that feeling like that. It's just, okay? Yeah, sorry. So sorry, keep your hands. It's basic, that feeling. Now I'm doing that. Right here is where I would do my sweet spot of the tennis racket feeling. So I'm going to put it a little lower, so it's like, I'm going boom, that feeling, boom, that feeling. And then this hand falls with its heaviness attached to my frame, like that feeling. So it's like, and then cut. And this is like through my shape, that feeling like that. So be careful not to, but more. Okay, capture that image. One way what kata, I think, is engendering in your nervous system are movement patterns. Movement patterns. You know, we were watching the other day some very skillful pianists, this Hiromi Yahara, really amazing pianist, and it's just these movement patterns that are really ingrained in their nervous system. So I think what we do is the same idea. So there's certain kind of inflections, certain movements that just want to become second nature, just very natural. And even stepping, like for example, in Aiki, and they have something they call a triangle step, where you kind of deviate and then cut in, deviate and cut. Well, they don't do it quite in a commodity, they'll usually just step. In other words, what they do is they surrender the center line and then they take the center line. So a lot of weapons practice is done that way, where you kind of avoid and then cut back in, and then cut off. People can make the same kind of shape. But that's a little movement pattern right there. That's one example of a movement pattern. Double blocking is a movement pattern. So like yesterday I said, that's a drak, because I associate movement patterns almost like a synesthet with sounds. So it's like drak, 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 drak. Different ways of moving, but whether I'm moving with it or in the opposite direction. But this little double blocking action, that's double blocking. That's a double block, right? So let's try just to kind of get into engender these feelings in our shape. Hector-san. Just Hector-san. Yeah. We'll just have our partner, we'll start with simply having them put their arm out. Just put their arm out, use it as a makiwara. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just get this feeling. And I'm going to maybe do a version where I'm turning my body away. And I'm going to do a version where I'm turning my body in, away, maybe to this side, maybe in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this, or I'm going to use that. So I create some sort of potential. If I'm leaning away, I have that to come back. If I'm leaning in, the motion is in, I have that to come in. So I'm never in a neutral place. But that little boom, boom, boom. Let's try it with the partner jump. So the next thing I would say is now you have this motion, and think, what can I ride off of that? Like what does this position offer to me? And as opposed to maybe what does this position offer me? So this is different than that. So how I angle my body. If I'm leaning back, I obviously have really nice motion to come back in, like using that edge. So I could strike that way like that. And that's not feeling. So like that. If I'm going the other direction, you know, maybe elbow, punch, whatever. So you can try that one. So I'm gonna drape. So this potential here and this leg, and that leg. So 1, 2. Then drape. Super slow. But what you want to ask yourself is, like, what do these positions then offer me in the subsequent movement? Like, what would that facilitate next? So once you have the movement pattern, then what can that lead me into? Catch the elbow. And just, you have to be a bit of a jazz person. You have to sort of be improvising. The guy steps in a slightly awkward way. If you get too dictated, too entrained in the kata, then you can't adapt. So Satomi Sensei says it's taiki musu aiki, which means it's constantly adaptive aiki. Like you always want to be feeling with the occurrence and riding off of the information that the occurrence is giving you. Do you follow that idea? So now you have a tool. You have this body motion. So what can I explore with that body motion? Where can it lead me? So now try that and be a little bit of a jazz artist with your partner. So once you identify the truck, whether you're going that way or to the inside, once you hear this rhythm, then maybe uchioke isn't that anymore. Maybe uchioke is that. Maybe Ginambarai isn't that anymore. Ginambarai might be that. Or Agiyuki might be that. Follow? But what you're tuning into is not the movement anymore, but that quality of drak. So, and then if you think about uchioke, is like if he's punching, this is like, go back. If he's punching, he's making, oh yes, he's making strong punch. One beat movement. One beat movement. So how am I going to make a 2-beat motion in the time it takes him to make a 1-beat movement? So it's better for me to make, there's my move, that's my response. And then the other hand maybe is connecting my center. You see, but there's my block, there's my block, there's my block. And then the second hand is, I'm imposing my center. You see? But I didn't feel that until I felt that feeling. And it can be, and then that can take any form. So we start with these details, but we kind of gravitate toward just rhythms. So you just attune to that feeling and not the construct. It's a bit of a gap to jump across, but your perception has to get to that place. And I would say, in my personal practice now, that this is sort of my exploration. Is I've spent 50 years training in the technical side of karate, but when I see people that are further down the path than myself, and I would refer to like Satomi Sensei, I think one of the main places is they're perceiving differently. Like their operating system, let's call it, like where everything is sort of being motivated from, is different. And when I was a kid, I read Nishiyama. My first karate book was Nishiyama and Brown, Karate: The Art of Empty Hand Fighting. $7.50 hardback. And in the very beginning, they had these concepts: Mizu no Kokoro, like a mind like water, and Tsuki no Kokoro, a mind like the moon. And I remember I read them as a 13-year-old or whatever, and they sounded really cool, like something that Kwai Chang Caine would get from Kung Fu Guy, and that was kind of cool. But I immediately went back to the my Betty technique and practicing that. Now I've come back. This is really, my karate lives in that space. That's the pursuit right now, is in this place of Mizu no Kokoro, Tsuki no Kokoro, good zanshin, good connection feeling, not being perturbed, just letting my body respond naturally as possible. You know, as soon as, for example, jump. So, for example, say I just grab a hold of John like that. So grab a hold of me. Most of us do this, right? Like our first response is this. But if my first response is it feels way different. Do you follow that? Now you can talk technique forever, but your technique is operating on one of those two circumstances. So in the dojo, we practice this where you maybe just snatch a hold of your partner's arm and you try not to react. You try to just stay super loose and super natural. So that would be having a mind like water. So that when I'm agitated, reality becomes not a clear image anymore. Okay? Suki no kokoro is I want to see my partner globally. So, come back again, John. Okay, now grab me again in that same fashion. So I want to be able to know where John's foot is there. Like I want to feel all of my opponents. Like a lot of times you see people, like I watch like YouTube videos of people fighting, and they're like this, and they're all like up in this processing zone like that. And I'm thinking, good Lord, there's all sorts of stuff you're not even paying attention to. Because we tend, when we're stressful, to get kind of myopic, right? And you want to do just the opposite. You want to open up to the possibilities, as opposed to being like in this caught space, I'll call it that. You're caught psychologically, physically when you're in this space. When you're in this space, you're not caught at all. Do you follow that? So how do we let our practice, our general training, everyday training, lead us to these states of perception? Which I would argue is how you want to live your life anyway. You don't want to go through life like this, right? Does that, yeah. And if you can find that, then you find great value.